My wife sold our daughter's antique painting for $95,000 without even telling me. What happened next shocked her. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That painting wasn't just a decoration. It had been in Lily's family for generations. My daughter loved it. She would spend hours looking at the details, imagining the story behind every brushstroke. To her, it wasn't money, it was a piece of her history, a part of her childhood. I looked at Samantha, trying to find a hint that she was joking, but her calm, collected expression said it all. She had sold it. The amount didn't matter to her. It was as if she didn't even think about Lily, about me, about the trust we had in each other. I felt a wave of disbelief crash over me. How could someone do this, someone you share your life with, someone who promised to protect your family? Lily didn't know yet. I tried to stay calm, but my hands shook as I dialed her room. She was sitting on her bed, hugging her knees, staring at the empty wall where the painting used to hang. When I told her what happened, her face crumpled. Tears ran down her cheeks, and she whispered, "Why would she do this?" It was mine. I didn't have an answer. I wanted to yell, to scream, to demand an explanation, but I couldn't find the words. Samantha didn't seem to feel the weight of what she'd done. She treated it like a simple transaction, a business deal, while Lily's heart broke in pieces. I sat with my daughter, holding her close, wishing there was a way to undo it, wishing someone could tell me why the person I trusted most could hurt us so deeply. That night, the house felt empty. Not because the painting was gone, but because trust had been shattered. I kept thinking about all the small moments I had overlooked, the little lies, the secretive smiles, the things left unsaid. It all made sense now, in a way that hurt more than anything else. Samantha had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. I promised myself, quietly, that I wouldn't let this slide. Not for the painting. Not for the money. For Lily. I needed to find a way to make things right, to protect her, and to show her that betrayal doesn't go unanswered. I didn't want revenge out of anger, I wanted justice, and I wanted my daughter to see that some things are worth fighting for. As I tucked Lily into bed that night, she clung to me tightly. Her sobs softened, but the pain in her eyes stayed. I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The beginning of exposing the truth, standing up for my daughter, and finally making sure Samantha realized that some actions have consequences, whether she believes it or not. After the shock of the painting, I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. Samantha had always been charming, but there were moments when her smile didn't reach her eyes. I realized she had been quietly unhappy, frustrated with the way I handled our money, or maybe just jealous of the life Lily and I were building together. It wasn't just about the painting. There had been small signs over the years, things I brushed off as misunderstandings or minor arguments. She would roll her eyes at my suggestions, make secret purchases, or avoid answering questions directly. At the time, I thought it was nothing serious, just the normal tension of marriage. Now, after the betrayal, all those little moments made sense. They were pieces of a larger picture I hadn't wanted to see. Lily, on the other hand, had been completely unaware of these tensions. For her, the painting was a treasure, a connection to her grandmother, and a symbol of the stories she loved hearing. She would spend hours talking to me about the details she noticed, the colors she loved, or how the light in the room made it glow. Samantha didn't seem to notice, or maybe she just didn't care. I realized how selfishly she had put her desires above the feelings of our daughter. I started thinking carefully about why Samantha had done it. Was it pure greed, or was there more behind her actions? The more I thought, the more I understood that her resentment had been building silently for years. She didn't respect Lily's feelings, and she didn't respect mine. Her decisions had become increasingly self-centered, and the sale of the painting was the first major betrayal I could finally see clearly. As I sat quietly at night, watching Samantha move around the house, I began to plan. I didn't want to act in anger, but I needed to uncover her true motives. I had to know why she had done this and make sure that Lily and I were protected in the process. I wanted to understand her mind, to see the full extent of her intentions, before taking any steps to hold her accountable. The contrast between us became clear in my mind. I had always tried to do right by my family, to protect them, to keep our home steady and safe. Samantha, meanwhile, seemed focused only on herself, blind to the harm she caused. I felt a mix of sadness and determination. Sadness for the way things had been allowed to grow unchecked, and determination to make sure our family's trust and happiness were never threatened again. For the first time, I saw the depth of the danger Samantha posed, not just in that one act, but in the way she had quietly allowed resentment and greed to guide her choices. I knew I had to act carefully, think ahead, and protect Lily while exposing the truth. I couldn't let her betrayal go unnoticed. The path ahead wasn't easy, but I felt a quiet clarity settle in me. I wasn't going to let this break us. After the painting was gone, Lily changed. She became quiet, staying in her room more than usual, avoiding the living room, and speaking only in short sentences. Her laughter, which used to fill the house, was gone. It hurt me to see her like this. She didn't understand why her mother could do something so cruel, and I could see the confusion and sadness weighing on her. I tried to be there for her as much as I could. Every night, I would sit on her bed, talk to her, and listen. Sometimes she would cry without saying a word, and I would just hold her, letting her know she wasn't alone. We started spending small moments together, drawing, reading, even cooking simple meals. Slowly, we rebuilt some trust and comfort between us. Lily began opening up a little, sharing her thoughts and fears, and I realized that, in a strange way, this tragedy was making our bond stronger. Samantha, on the other hand, seemed angry rather than remorseful. Whenever I tried to bring up the painting or Lily's feelings, she would become defensive. She blamed me for the tension in the house, saying I had been too controlling or overprotective. She even suggested that Lily's unhappiness was my fault. It was frustrating and painful to see someone refuse to take responsibility for the hurt they had caused. Even our neighbors and extended family noticed something was wrong. Casual conversations felt strained, and people would sometimes ask if everything was okay. I could tell that Samantha's behavior and Lily's withdrawal were visible to others. It was embarrassing, but it also made me more determined. I couldn't let this situation fester without action. I began quietly documenting everything. Every detail of the painting's sale, every defensive comment Samantha made, every moment of manipulation I noticed, I wrote it down. I knew I needed a clear record, not just for my own understanding but in case things escalated or if I needed proof later. It wasn't about spying or being petty, it was about protecting Lily and ensuring that Samantha's choices didn't go unchecked. The house felt tense, filled with unspoken words and careful glances. I could see that Samantha was aware I was paying attention, but she didn't understand the depth of my resolve. She continued acting as if nothing serious had happened, but I knew the truth was settling in. Betrayal, once done, leaves marks that can't be hidden. Through it all, I focused on Lily. I wanted her to feel safe, to know that her father would always fight for her, and that she could trust someone completely. Each day, as we shared small moments of laughter or conversation, I could feel her slowly beginning to heal. She was still hurting, but I could see hope returning to her eyes. I knew this was just the beginning. Samantha had caused pain, but I also knew that the story wasn't over. I had a plan forming in my mind, not one of rash revenge, but one that would ensure she understood the consequences of her betrayal. For now, I had to be patient, protect my daughter, and prepare for what was coming next. I soon found out what Samantha had done with the $95,000. It wasn't for bills or anything that helped the family. She had spent it on herself, luxury clothes, expensive jewelry, and even high-stakes gambling trips. The truth hit me like a punch to the chest. She hadn't just sold the painting, she had betrayed our family for her own selfish pleasures. The more I learned about where the money went, the angrier I felt. It wasn't just the loss of the painting anymore, it was the complete disregard for Lily's feelings, for our family, and for me. I wanted to confront her immediately, to yell and demand an explanation, but something inside me stopped me. Acting in anger would only give her the upper hand. I needed a plan. I began quietly investigating. I looked through receipts, bank statements, and credit card records. I traced the transactions she had tried to hide. Every purchase she thought I would never notice made the betrayal feel heavier. Each new discovery made my frustration grow, but it also strengthened my resolve. I realized I had to be careful and patient if I wanted to make sure Samantha faced the consequences properly. At the same time, I started paying closer attention to her movements. I didn't follow her everywhere, but I noted meetings and trips she hadn't mentioned. I wanted to understand the full scope of what she was doing. This wasn't just about punishment, it was about protecting Lily from further harm and ensuring she could trust her father completely. And Lily did. Slowly, she began leaning on me more than ever. She would confide in me about her feelings, her sadness, and even her anger at her mother. I listened, comforted, and reassured her. In those moments, I could see the bond between us growing stronger. She knew I would fight for her, no matter what. She could see that I wasn't just angry, I was determined to make things right. Inside, I struggled with conflicting emotions. I wanted to act immediately, to make Samantha pay for what she had done. But I also knew there was a right way to handle this. I didn't want revenge fueled by rage. I wanted justice, fairness, and a clear path that would protect my daughter and expose Samantha for the selfish choices she had made. Every day, as I documented her spending and planned my next steps, I felt both frustration and clarity. Frustration at the betrayal, at the selfishness, and at the pain inflicted on Lily. Clarity because I knew what I had to do, and I would not let Samantha's greed harm us again. The house felt tense, but the tension was different now. Samantha thought she was in control, spending freely, acting as if nothing mattered. But behind the scenes, I was preparing. I was building a record, understanding every detail, and making sure that when the time came, there would be no way for her to escape the consequences of her actions. And through it all, Lily's trust in me grew stronger. She began to smile again, albeit cautiously, and I could see the hope returning in her eyes. I realized that protecting her and guiding her through this betrayal was the most important thing I could do. Samantha might have taken the painting and the money, but she could never take our bond. While reviewing the paperwork related to the painting sale, I noticed something unusual. There was a loophole in the documents Samantha had signed, something she had overlooked in her rush to sell it. It wasn't obvious, but as I read carefully, I realized this mistake could give me a chance to undo what she had done. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. I decided I needed help. I called my old friend and attorney, Mark Reynolds. Mark had always been straightforward and wise. After explaining everything, he agreed to look into the situation. He listened carefully as I told him about Samantha's actions, the sale, and the pain it caused Lily. Mark said there might be a way to reclaim the painting or at least recover the money, but we had to be smart. Acting too soon could ruin our chances. Meanwhile, Samantha remained completely unaware. She carried on as if nothing had happened, spending her time and money freely. She didn't suspect that I was watching, planning, and quietly preparing a strategy. The contrast between her careless confidence and the storm forming in my mind made this situation even more intense. I had to keep calm, but inside, I was burning with determination. I spent hours thinking about the best approach. I didn't want to confront Samantha immediately. I knew if I rushed in with anger, she could twist the situation, manipulate words, or hide evidence. Instead, I plotted carefully. Every step was planned to ensure she would face the consequences of her choices while Lily and I were protected. Every detail mattered. As I worked on the plan with Mark, Lily began to notice a change in me. She saw that I was determined, calm, and taking action. Slowly, her hope started returning. She would peek into my office and watch me with wide eyes, realizing that her father wasn't going to let this betrayal define their lives. I could see the relief on her face, the little spark of trust and belief that things could be made right. I also started explaining small things to Lily without telling her the full plan. I wanted her to feel safe and involved, to understand that we were taking action in a way that protected her. Every time she smiled or laughed again, I felt a sense of victory that wasn't about revenge, it was about justice and family. Samantha still had no idea. She thought the painting and the money were gone for good, that the damage was done. But I knew differently. Every meeting with Mark, every calculation and note I made, was bringing us closer to restoring what had been taken. The tension in the house grew, though Samantha didn't realize why. This turning point was crucial. For the first time, I felt control returning. I wasn't just reacting emotionally anymore, I was acting strategically. And Lily could see that. Her trust in me, her belief in our family, was healing. I knew the next steps would be critical, but I was ready. Samantha might have caused the pain, but she had no idea that her actions were about to catch up with her. Samantha had grown bolder. She wore expensive dresses she couldn't have afforded before, talked about lavish dinners, and even bragged about trips she was planning. Every time she mentioned her purchases, she smiled as if showing off what she had gained. She acted like nothing mattered, like the painting and the trust she had broken were meaningless. I watched carefully. I didn't react or confront her directly. Instead, I started creating situations that would reveal the truth of her actions without her realizing it. I asked casual questions about her new purchases, made small comments about the painting, and subtly recorded details of her spending habits. Samantha continued to flaunt her wealth, unaware that every move she made was being noticed, remembered, and documented. Her arrogance was growing, but cracks were starting to show. Small things slipped, an annoyed glance when I asked about her finances, a careless comment about needing quick cash, moments where her charm faltered. I could see that the confidence she displayed for others was a mask. Beneath it, her choices were catching up with her, and I was waiting for the right moment to show her that actions have consequences. At night, I reflected on the betrayal. It hurt more than anything I had experienced because it came from someone I trusted completely. Samantha had been my wife, the mother of my child, the person I believed would protect our family. To have her disregard our daughter's feelings, our home, and our trust so casually, it cut deeper than any anger or frustration could. I realized that betrayal from someone close leaves a mark that lingers long after the immediate event. Meanwhile, Lily was quietly coping in her own way. She started writing in her journal, pouring out her feelings about the painting, her mother's choices, and her sadness. I didn't push her to share it, but I knew she was processing the pain. Her small act of writing was like a seed, a private way to release the hurt and begin understanding the situation. I saw hope in this. One day, when the time was right, her words would become part of her closure and healing. As Samantha continued to flaunt her life, I remained calm. I didn't need to confront her yet. I knew that her overconfidence was a weakness. People who act without thinking, who assume no one is watching, always leave themselves exposed. Every flashy purchase, every bragging comment, and every careless moment was slowly building a path to show her the reality of her choices. I spent time with Lily, helping her feel safe and understood, while quietly planning the next step. The tension in the house was thick, though Samantha didn't notice it. She thought she was untouchable, that her actions had no consequences. But I knew differently. The cracks were there, and I would make sure she saw them fully. Betrayal might hurt the most when it comes from someone you trust, but it also reveals the truth, about them, about yourself, and about the bonds that truly matter. And in our home, the strongest bond was between Lily and me. I knew I couldn't handle this alone anymore. To make sure Samantha faced the consequences of selling Lily's painting, I reached out to an art expert, Eleanor Hayes, a collector I had met years ago. She was sharp, experienced, and had a reputation for spotting dishonest deals. I explained everything to her carefully, the painting, the sale, and the circumstances that made it unfair and possibly illegal. Eleanor agreed to help me quietly, without letting Samantha know. Together, we started creating a plan. We didn't want confrontation yet, we wanted Samantha's actions to lead her into her own mistakes. Every step had to feel natural so she wouldn't suspect anything. We researched the sale, found the buyer, and prepared a way to demonstrate that the transaction was not legitimate. I felt a mix of fear and hope. If we did this right, Samantha would finally face the truth. Meanwhile, Samantha continued her careless lifestyle, oblivious to the storm forming around her. Every new purchase, every boastful comment, every careless decision was slowly setting her up. She didn't know that her actions were being watched and recorded. Each time she flaunted her wealth or ignored Lily's feelings, it pushed her closer to exposure. I stayed calm, letting the tension build naturally. At times, I struggled with my emotions. Part of me wanted to act immediately, to let Samantha feel the anger and frustration I had carried for weeks. But another part reminded me that this wasn't about revenge for its own sake. It was about justice, about teaching her a lesson, and about protecting Lily from future hurt. I wanted Samantha to understand that betrayal has consequences, without stooping to actions that could harm my own integrity. Lily continued to support me quietly. She would sit nearby while I worked with Eleanor, asking questions or sharing small insights. Sometimes she would peek at documents or maps of the plan, curious but trusting me to handle everything. These moments brought us closer together. She could see that I was not only fighting for her painting or the money but also for her sense of safety and fairness. The tension in the house was now almost tangible. Samantha went about her day thinking everything was normal, unaware that her world was about to shift. I could see the cracks forming in her behavior, little slips that would help us prove what she had done. But I stayed patient. Rushing would ruin everything. Every night, I thought about how betrayal hurts most when it comes from someone you love. And every night, I reminded myself that this wasn't just about anger, it was about teaching a lesson, protecting my daughter, and reclaiming what had been taken from us. Lily's trust, her quiet hope, and her growing bond with me were the most important parts of this fight. The plan was taking shape, and for the first time, I felt confident that Samantha would have to face the consequences. The stage was set, and the pieces were in place. The next moves would determine whether justice would be served, and whether Lily's world could finally start to heal. The moment finally came. I had all the evidence I needed, thanks to Eleanor's help, and I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I called Samantha into the living room and laid everything out in front of her, receipts, bank statements, and documents proving the painting had been sold without our consent and that the sale had been reckless and selfish. At first, she froze. I could see the shock on her face. She hadn't expected me to uncover everything. For so long, she had assumed I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't fight back, and that her actions would go unchallenged. Now, that illusion was shattered. Samantha became defensive immediately, raising her voice and trying to twist the story. She blamed circumstances, bad timing, even me, for making her feel pressured. But I stayed calm. I let her talk, knowing that her own words would betray her. She realized, slowly, that I had been careful, patient, and strategic. She had underestimated me, and that mistake was about to cost her. As the reality sank in, her demeanor changed. I could see guilt and fear flicker in her eyes. The anger she had provoked in me wasn't meant for her to endure, it was meant to show the weight of her actions. And it worked. Samantha understood, for the first time, that she had not only hurt Lily but had betrayed the trust of her family completely. I spoke slowly, clearly, and without yelling. I told her that this wasn't just about money or a painting. It was about respect, responsibility, and the choices we make for the people we love. I explained how every selfish decision she had made had consequences and that Lily deserved to be protected from such betrayal. I could see her trying to respond, but the truth was undeniable. The evidence left no room for excuses. Lily was in the room quietly, watching everything unfold. She had hidden behind the sofa at first, unsure of what was going to happen. But as she saw me speaking calmly, standing firm, and presenting the facts clearly, she began to understand her father's strength. She realized that justice didn't have to come from anger, it could come from wisdom, strategy, and integrity. For Samantha, the confrontation was crushing. She had always relied on charm and manipulation, but none of it worked against what was real and undeniable. Every excuse she tried to make fell apart, and she had no way to avoid facing the truth. I watched her shrink under the weight of her actions, finally seeing the consequences she had been blind to for so long. After it was over, Lily came forward slowly. She held my hand and whispered how proud she was of me. That small gesture meant more than anything. It showed that she understood what I had done was not just for revenge, but to protect her and teach a lesson that would last. The confrontation ended not with shouting or chaos, but with clarity. Samantha had been exposed. Lily had seen her father's strength, and I had finally ensured that betrayal could not go unchecked. For the first time in weeks, I felt that the worst of the storm was behind us. After the confrontation, Samantha couldn't ignore the consequences anymore. The evidence we had collected with Eleanor was clear, and she faced the reality of what she had done. There were legal and moral consequences she couldn't escape. The painting had been sold without proper authorization, and the buyer agreed to return the funds after seeing the documentation. Samantha tried to argue, to twist the story, and even hinted at blaming others, but this time no one listened. I made sure Lily received her rightful inheritance. Either the original painting was restored, or she received a replacement of equal value that honored her family's history. More importantly, she regained her trust in the process and her sense of security. Seeing the relief and happiness in her eyes reminded me why I had stayed patient and careful. Protecting Lily and her heritage was worth every second of planning and waiting. Samantha tried to manipulate the situation, pretending to show remorse or shifting blame, but it didn't work. She realized, fully and finally, that her choices had consequences. The selfishness and greed she had shown were no longer hidden behind charm or excuses. She felt the weight of what she had done, the betrayal of her daughter, the destruction of trust, and the fear she had caused in the people who loved her most. Throughout it all, I stayed calm. I didn't seek revenge for the sake of anger. I wanted justice, not punishment fueled by rage. I explained to Samantha clearly that some actions carry natural consequences, and she needed to understand the impact of her choices. By standing firm and patient, I showed that courage, persistence, and integrity could achieve what shouting or fighting never could. Justice didn't need drama, it needed truth and steadfastness. Lily grew stronger through this experience. She learned what boundaries meant and how important trust is in relationships. She saw that her father's actions were not about being harsh but about protecting what mattered most. The experience taught her to value honesty, to understand the consequences of actions, and to trust in people who truly care for her. The household slowly began to settle. Samantha no longer had the same control or influence over decisions, and she had to face the reality of her choices alone. Lily and I focused on healing, spending time together, and rebuilding the happiness that had been threatened by betrayal. Each day, her smile returned a little more, and I felt the bond between us grow stronger. By the end, it was clear, justice doesn't require anger or revenge. It requires careful thought, courage, and a willingness to stand up for what's right. Samantha had learned her lesson, and Lily had regained her faith in her family. Our lives were slowly returning to balance, with a renewed understanding of boundaries, trust, and the importance of protecting the ones you love. The painting was more than just a piece of art, it was a symbol. A symbol of what had been lost, what had been regained, and the strength of a father fighting for his child. In that quiet victory, we found closure, understanding, and a future that felt safe and hopeful again. After everything that had happened, life slowly began to settle. Samantha no longer had control over the house or the decisions that mattered. She spent her days reflecting on the choices she had made and the pain she had caused. I didn't seek to punish her further, I let her face the consequences quietly. The lessons were hers to learn, and I knew she needed time to understand the depth of her betrayal. For Lily and me, life started to feel peaceful again. We didn't rush anything, and we didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. Instead, we focused on rebuilding our routines and strengthening our bond. We would spend mornings reading together, afternoons drawing or cooking, and evenings sharing stories about family and life. These small moments became the foundation of our quiet happiness, reminding us that life could be calm and safe once more. I made it a point to teach Lily about resilience and self-respect. I explained that betrayal can hurt deeply, especially when it comes from someone you trust. But I also showed her that strength comes from standing up for yourself and the people you love, not from holding anger or seeking revenge. She watched me navigate difficult choices with patience and care, and slowly, she began to understand that courage and integrity can change outcomes without losing your peace. Lily's confidence grew. She started taking pride in her own decisions, learning to express her feelings openly, and trusting her instincts. She could now face challenges knowing that mistakes from others didn't have to define her life. I felt proud of her strength, knowing she had learned to protect herself emotionally while staying kind and thoughtful. Meanwhile, the house felt lighter. Samantha's presence no longer cast a shadow over our days. Her absence from the decision-making and emotional center of our home allowed Lily and me to create an environment where honesty, respect, and love mattered most. We had learned from the past, and now we had the chance to move forward without fear or tension. The experience left a lasting impression on both of us. We understood that betrayal is painful, but it can also reveal what is truly important: family, trust, and resilience. I realized that protecting my daughter and teaching her these lessons was more powerful than any punishment I could give. In the end, victory didn't come from anger or revenge, it came from courage, persistence, and love. As we settled into our new life, Lily and I shared quiet moments of laughter and reflection. We had survived the betrayal and grown stronger together. The painting had been returned, but more importantly, our trust, bond, and sense of family had been restored. Our story ended not with chaos or bitterness, but with hope, empowerment, and closure. Lily learned the value of trust and resilience, I learned the strength of patience and strategy, and together, we discovered that the truest victories in life are quiet, steady, and filled with love.